15 trillion Dogecoin. Any excess on 15? Any excess on 15? Sold for 70 trillion.
Today we had an auction where we had to sort of propose our products and innovations to the rest of the innovation students, and we had to sort of work as a team to think and devise a realistic solution for a futuristic scenario.
Our situation ended up being a shoe that predicts future knee injuries and hip injuries.
And for the past week or so, we've been preparing cardboard prototypes and prototypes in general of different items from the future. We had to basically sell that to a group of investors.
Prior to the session, the students had been working on the theoretical underpinnings of scenario development and particularly creative scenario development. So they learnt the tools, the skills, they practiced developing scenarios, but also learnt different aspects of how humans might behave within scenarios, how different aspects of conflict might happen within those situations as well. By being given that brief, the students were able to then create objects that might speak to certain aspects of those scenarios that they had developed through that process of analytical thinking within their groups. So really lo-fi prototyping, so nothing too technical, nothing too complicated for our students. We essentially worked with paper, scissors, pens. What was really important was the idea of being able to have a go relatively quickly using things that they might be able to find just around the sort of studio, or they might be able to find around their home. There are real benefits to students working in groups. In the short term, students learn about themselves, but they also learn about others, and they're able to actively operate as a team and find their role and develop things collectively. This is really important from an innovation perspective, and also because our students are coming from interdisciplinary environments as well. So we think it's really important that students are able to learn from each other, they're able to discuss their individual interpretations, but equally to be able to synthesize their ideas in some form of collective output.
I enjoyed sort of the group work because a lot of the time in our normal lectures and our day-to-day sort of lessons, we don't get as much group interaction. I think this provides us with a brilliant opportunity to sort of socialise in a way while sort of improving those unique academic abilities, something that makes you more creative, employable in general, and able to work around different scenarios.
We now are living in the future on our magic money of Dogecoin. So you now each have 30
The auction is a really
Dogecoin
simple idea that allows students to be able to bid on an item. So we printed out some coins, which we gave to the students. We assigned a value to that, and each group had to then work out their bidding strategy, and each group equally had to put up their item for auction.
Knowing that there's like money on the line, you have to present something that really, grabs them. It's very engaging, very involving type of lesson.
These were first year students. What we don't want to do is to put a huge amount of pressure on students who may feel nervous about presenting, who may feel nervous about putting forward their ideas. So this quite creative, imaginative, funny scenario was a way for our students to get used to presenting to each other, where they're less concerned with presenting, which might feel like quite a fearful exercise, and are more concerned with how they can drive up their bids through an auction process. It's really important for our students to think about audience and to think about different ways in which they can present to different audiences. This was a very low stakes, creative exercise where our students were very concerned with entertaining, making people laugh. It's important for our students to recognize that that can be a really successful part of presenting and getting your ideas across. Later on within their program, our students will also learn more formal ways to be able to present, whether that's through data, through visualization, through reports, but all of that will be really important for them as they leave university and they think about the best ways in which they can communicate, both within groups and teams, but also to other audiences as well, so that they can have the greatest impact possible. I think it's really important to think about how you utilize the environment for a task and group work as well. We have round tables. It's really important during group work that students can look at each other and learn from each other. And the physical environment really helps them to be able to do that rather than looking at a teacher, for example, where they're looking to us for answers. Equally, the environment's quite flat. So if you're in a steps lecture theatre and looking up at people, for example, that can be quite intimidating for students coming to the front. So although we do teach in those sorts of spaces as well, often with that type of activity, we do try and think about how we can minimise the stress on students when they're presenting. So different ways in which students who perhaps have less experience or less confidence in terms of pitching and presenting might be able to speak to their peers in a way that just minimises some of the anxiety that might be associated with that. Our students will build on the ideas, not just the concepts of futures, but around pitching, around creative development, about how to respond to ambiguity, for example, in terms of their designs, and also their ability to be able to put forward, both with their peers and with others, in terms of how they present their ideas and what they're worth to them.
I think doing the work definitely makes you think outside the box.
You've got to find something to sell. So it's a lot of brainstorming and coming up with ideas until you kind of say one out loud that isn't totally ridiculous and you can actually go somewhere with it.
It's really important for a facilitator during creative development to not get too involved in the process of creation. So part of my role as facilitator was giving the groups enough time to be able to air their ideas, to be able to build on those as a group, to be able to create a rapport and some form of consensus around what they were making. As a facilitator in a learning environment, it was really important to be able to make sure that where those groups were perhaps less functional, that I was able to watch, observe, intervene by way of asking questions. So what were you working on, for example? How might you build on the ideas? Ensuring that actually as groups became more functional, that people were able to input and to be able to collectively create rather than perhaps being dominated by one or two voices in those groups. One of the most challenging things as an educator in terms of active learning is the ability to let students go where they need to go in terms of group work. And there can be a temptation to want to structure your entire class, to structure every activity, and to be very prescriptive in terms of what the outcomes of that will be. Part of active learning is risk. Students will take a risk in terms of how they respond to stimuli, but equally as educators, you have to be able to take a risk in order to be able to step back and let students take that learning where they need to. Sometimes the learning outcomes are intended, and that's where we want it to go, but sometimes students can learn other things as well. They can learn confidence, they can learn the ability to work with people that they wouldn't naturally work with as well, and that really helps them in terms of their engagement within the curriculum and also beyond it as well. We also spend a lot of time asking students to work on their ideas outside of the classroom as well. This allows them to have more agency in terms of how they take the ideas forward, but also more responsibility as well in terms of how they engage with the learning, engage with the stimuli, and bring that back. My advice to any educator in terms of whether you should use active learning is to do it. Absolutely, to engage and with that process. It takes the burden away from you as an educator to have to plan, deliver, and give everything yourself. But equally, students can surprise you in terms of what they take out of that process. Equally, you don't have to throw away everything that you've done and what you've done and how you teach and how you learn. You might be able to give up maybe 10, 15 minutes to an activity on something that you're confident that students have already engaged with, but equally that will give students a different way of synthesizing, of thinking about, of engaging with their peers, and that independence in terms of their learning, which can really build on criticality and actually deepen students' learning and engagement with the subject overall.